And this is, I think, one of the deepest controversies in ethics. Some people really just, with the utilitarians, stare at this and they're like, well, at the end of the day, what matters are these outcomes, and we just want to bring about as good of an outcome as we can. And other people think, no, there's just some things that you must not do. And I'm I confess I do not have the most satisfying view about this. I'm not just gonna like stamp my foot. My view is a kind of boring view, which says almost all the time the Ursula Le Guins of the world are right. But if you make the costs and the benefits extreme enough, then the utilitarians are right. If like somebody tells me like you need to like go home and cut off one of your children's fingers, right? That'd be awful. But like, if you don't do that, someone's going to drop a nuclear bomb on a big city, and I know that's all true, and I can trust the person, et cetera, right? Like, it seems to me that I should cut off my child's finger. I mean, that's awful. Like, it would. I'm not sure actually physically I could do it, but I think that's the thing I should do. Just because the relationship between the cost, which is awful, and I'm inflicting harm on my child, et cetera, but that the harm being avoided is so much bigger that it seems to me that in that case we should we should do it. I just think the question then becomes like, well, where are the cutoffs? And I think nobody knows.
You're a professor of ethics, and it's even hard for you to try to find a bit what is right, what is wrong. There's so many cases where it's complicated. Is that something that we can expect from people to act morally when there's all these challenges? We talked about the epistemic challenge, we need to be informed. There is the challenges of, okay, there's these different ways to look at ethics. How are we supposed then to make good decisions?
First of all, I think, and as with your question about like how much should people like how much of an obligation do people have to be informing themselves, I think we can expect different things of different people, right? I think if somebody has been like there are people in the world who have gotten no love in their whole lives, and like they have been like suffering and struggling through their whole lives, and I think somebody who's like whose whole experience of life is like that, we can't expect very much of that person. Like that person may be incapable of seeing another human being like as a human being just because what they've experienced has been so awful. On the other hand, I think there are many people that we can expect a lot of. Like I certainly expect a lot of myself, and I regularly fall short of my own expectations, but that's some of the work of being a person, I think. And so I think it's going to vary from person to person. I'm inclined to think one thing about human culture in general, and maybe our particular cultural moment now in particular, is that we are really quick to judge other people. And when we see other people performing actions that we think are not okay, and maybe even that, we're right about that, we're very often inclined to think, oh, well, that's a bad person, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's very complicated. People perform actions that are deeply regrettable for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes they do it out of ignorance. Sometimes they do it because they don't have the right kind of control over their emotions. Sometimes they do it because they believe there's some greater good that's at stake, and they don't understand in a proper way the relationship between these things, right? So I think there's like lots of interesting kinds of explanations like that. And I guess what I'm interested in thinking is like, yeah, there are things that I think in ethics it's extremely hard to know. Like the thing I was just talking about, like where is the threshold where this harm is okay to inflict in order to avoid this catastrophic outcome? I think those questions extremely hard, but they're also incredibly easy questions in ethics. And I think we shouldn't forget that, right? Like an extremely easy question to ask, like, should I assault the next person I see today? No, I should not, right? Should I be thinking about how to address problems like climate change? I think, yes, I should, right? And so I think that one thing that can happen, and especially professionally, philosophers focus on where the debates are and where the controversies are, but we don't actually disagree about everything. But it's not interesting to sit down with a philosopher and just like, let's talk about all the things we agree about, right? Like I could have that conversation, but like I wouldn't teach an intro ethics class that way because like the students would just be like bored. It's like, yes, okay, like babies, we should give them lots of attention and love and resources and make sure that they have like a strong start in life. Like, all right, let's see like what arguments we can come up with for that. Like there's 1,000 different converging arguments. Like that would be Like that's you could do that, but nobody teaches an ethics class that way. And I think no one teaches an ethics class that way because the feel is like that isn't the thing that's like stretching our cognitive capacities to think about these issues. And I think what we're trying to do as philosophers is learn how to think better about the hard cases. But I think doing that could obscure the fact that I think there's actually a lot of cases where we are able to figure out the answers to these things.